Hello, family. It's your sister, Reverend Jocelyn here, and welcome to another episode of Faith on the Journey. If it's your first time tuning in, we welcome you. We are so glad that you are here and want you to know that we're committed to helping you strengthen your faith, heal your heart, and discover a sense of community. And we do so through a variety of ways by connecting you with a team of Christian counselors who care about you, who want to support you on your healing journey. And we also offer trauma healing trainings and support to churches across the country. You can learn about all these resources and so much more by visiting our website at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. Now, today, I'm excited to welcome to the show a wonderful woman of God who is doing some great work for the kingdom. Dr. Linda Bing is a speaker, author, and life coach dedicated to helping individuals to build better relationships in every area of their life. For over 2 decades, her seminars, couples coaching, and personal development sessions have helped to transform lives. She is a sought after keynote speaker and has been a part of the Les Brown Speakers Network. She was also the co host of Atlanta's V103 and 1380 WAOK Love and Relationships shows. She's a member of the civic and business organizations amongst her community, and she does so much work to help other marginalized groups and women to excel. There's so much more to this woman, but you're going to learn about that in just a moment. But I'm excited to welcome her to the show. Dr. Linda Bing, welcome.
Thank you, Reverend Jocelyn. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. I was
Good,
really looking
good.
forward to our conversation today,
Yes,
particularly
yes.
because of the subject that we're talking about. And I know I read your bio, but your bio actually doesn't speak to the topic that we're talking about today. And so I would actually like to start off with your story so our audience can learn a little bit more about you.
Sure. And thank you for the opportunity. I so appreciate it. So, as you know, I actually hail from Brooklyn, New York. And growing up, I grew up in a family where the dynamics between my mom and dad were not the best. Okay. It was not the role model for what marriage should be. And in fact, my parents divorced when I was 13 years of age. So that put in me a commitment for what my marriage would be like. And I was determined that I was going to find someone who was going to fit that storybook kind of a thing. I wanted to make sure that when I came home at the end of the day, that there was what I consider to be a soft place to land. And what I mean by that is someone there who would have a shoulder if I needed to cry, listen to my day, be comfortable and comforting, somebody who would find me sexy, pretty, desirable, smart, all of those great and wonderful things. And so people may wonder, okay, well, what's wrong with that? Nothing until he cheated. And so, even though I vowed that my marriage would not follow the path of my parents, I actually have been in a situation where I am now the survivor of divorce 2 times. And I was devastated by that. It shook me to the core. When you go through divorce, it's like, or at least for me, it was as if someone had put their hand into my chest, grabbed my heart, and squeezed it as they were pulling out. It caused me to be depressed. I had some shame, some guilt. Was I not pretty enough, smart enough, sexy enough? All of those things, the self doubt was incredible. And so I did go to counseling after each of those divorces. And then I decided that I was going to work on me. I'm a certified relationship specialist. I've got a PhD in psychology. And as you said, I'm a life coach. So I put together a process and I put myself through that process. What I learned on my journey is that we spend lots of times listening to those invisible tapes that keep playing over and over and over inside our heads. So without even realizing it, I was listening to the tapes that said, "You're a failure. It didn't work. You're just like your parents. You're not smart enough. You're not sexy enough." All of those things were working on a subconscious level because what we often don't realize is that anything that goes into your psyche, anything that you take into the brain through any of your senses, it remains in there. You may not be operating with that knowledge, but that's why we talk about a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. Your conscious mind basically exists to follow orders. Your subconscious mind is the part of the body, the part of the brain that sends the orders, and its primary job is to protect you. So if the messages that I learned, either directly or indirectly, if they were saying things like, you don't measure up, and, men don't treat women well and then they leave, as I would go into relationships, those are the messages that I would play. So oftentimes we are self sabotaging. And I realized in the process that rather than focus on what I wanted to have, I needed to focus on who do I need to be? I need to get back to my authentic self. Who does God say I am? Forget about mom and dad. Forget about baggage from past relationships. Forget about messages you got on the job, in the neighborhood. When they knock at the door and they're surprised that a Black woman who's not a maid is opening up. It's those kinds of life experiences that I've had. And so when those things continue, you have to just keep going back to, who does God say I am? And what does the word say? And when you live out of your authentic self, then you know that everything that happens is happening on purpose. You know that your steps are being ordered and you're working on who I need to be. So again, if I could just stay in that scriptural reference, that biblical space for just a moment, one of the things that I do know is that the Bible warns us about putting new wine into old wine skins. And that's like trying to put new behaviors into an old mindset. When you put new wine into old wine skins, those skins have become hard and brittle, and they crack and they break, and they cannot hold the new wine or those new behaviors. So what we need to do is put new wine into new wine skins, because new wine skins are supple and they're flexible and they expand based on the gases in the new wine. So if you want new wine in your life, you've got to become a new wineskin. And that's what my program did. It helped me, and I am now helping other women learn how to be new wineskin, or new wine for that new wineskin.
Ooh, you just delivered a sermon on us. I gotta take us back because you dropped so many gems. I was trying to write so fast. Okay. So we talked about a number of things. You had to shift your focus, it sounds like, from focusing on like what you wanted to get out of this relationship or this future marriage to being at a place where you focused on who you needed to become, who you needed to be. I know that you talked about a program, but let's back up a little bit and focus on your process. I want you to talk more about like some practical things that you did. What did you discover along the way for someone who has survived divorce? And I appreciate you saying survive, because it's really just that. Divorce can be very painful and traumatic. So someone who now is beginning to start over and explore, who do I need to become and what did I learn? Talk about what you did for that.
Absolutely. And I want your listeners to understand that I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with who you are or how you're behaving. It just might not be exactly what needs to happen at this particular point in time. So, for instance, I created what I call the distorted identity syndrome. And for me, the distorted identity syndrome says that, it's similar to, but not the same as the imposter syndrome. With the distorted identity syndrome, what's going on is that we have been given so many lies about who we are, and we're living other people's narrative of how we're supposed to behave. So our identity is distorted. And many times what happens is we either live it based on a suppressed identity or based on an exaggerated identity. So with a suppressed identity, maybe we come home and as a wife, maybe we don't speak up and use some of our gifts because we feel lesser than a man, or we don't really understand the biblical roles. And so we decide that I'm going to step back and let him do everything. That might be suppressed. On the job, it might look like, I'm not going to go to the social events of the organization. I'm just going to pull back. But then on the opposite end of that continuum, you have people who are into the exaggerated identity. So at home, you might come in and maybe you are so determined that no man is going to run over you the way your dad ran over your mom. And so you come in being so super strong that you are taking the head of the household role away from him. And then, actually, yes. And so when you look at it from a work standpoint, maybe you're the person who you show up at the social events, but your clothing is so out there and your hair is so out there and you're loud, and because you want to be seen, because you say, I'm not going to let them, dim my light. I'm going to be who I am. And so we go to one end of the spectrum or the other instead of finding our true place and where God says we need to be. So what I do when I was working with myself and when I'm working with other people is the first thing we have to do is examine what are those tapes that are playing in your head? What are the limiting beliefs? What do you believe to be true about yourself? Do you think you're not tall enough? Do you think you're not smart enough? Do you think that it's your responsibility to play a certain role in the family? There are all kinds of messages. Even if those messages worked for someone else in their situation, they may not be serving you well. So let's find out, what do you believe to be true about you and about your partner and about your situation? And then we can determine whether or not those messages are serving you well or not, because we all have them. And anything that you picked up, whether it was directly or indirectly, for however many years you've been walking on this planet, you still have those messages inside your head.
They are there. You are right. And that level of awareness of them and the ability to, I say, arrest those thoughts, those messages,
Yes. Take them
and
captive.
take them captive, like the word says, is critical. And one of the struggles that someone who might have gone through divorce might be wrestling with is saying, man, I don't know if I'll ever find love again. I can't put myself out there. I can't let this happen. And from a place of protection, they're afraid to try again, try love again. What have you learned about that? And how do you guide some of your clients through that process?
Yes. And sometimes people have been, I work primarily with women and primarily Black women, Black Christian women. And so when people come to me, many times they feel like, well, it doesn't matter to me whether I get married or not. That's not necessarily true, because we know that God created us to be in relationship. And so he has a desire for you to be in relationship. So you need to get your desires in line with his desire. Now, that doesn't mean that you're out there looking, but you allow yourself to become the treasure that can be found. So what you have to do is work on you. It's funny, when I was on radio, I would get women sometimes who would call in and they want a man who's got a good job with benefits, got his own car, his own house, all of these things. And then when I'm talking to them, you don't have any of that, So you're not going to be equally yoked. You have to have the same level of ambition of someone that you're looking to partner up with. So you need to make sure that your story is not clouding reality. You need to make sure that your expectations are expectations that can be met. So we need to make sure, as we're developing this mindset, and it's okay to know what you want, but don't be so locked in, because God is going to give you the person that you need. And many times, that's not that knight in shining armor. He's not coming in riding on a white horse. I hate to disappoint you, but that's not how it plays itself out. And quite often we get yoked with someone not because of the things on our list, but because of the things on God's list, because God knows what you have need of and who you need in order to be the head of your household.
You talked about the fact that we want to change our focus on like our process and our healing. Talk a little bit more about some of the things that you found to be helpful for you to heal. So you, because I know arresting the thoughts was a big thing. Also kind of adjusting your expectations and what you're focusing on, but talk a little bit more about your healing process before you entered into a new relationship, because I love to hear that as well.
Okay, so definitely just bathing myself in the word. I mean, there are times when I would go into my prayer room and pray. There are times I'd read. There are times I would just sit there and soak. I would just sit there and listen to spiritual music that would just minister to me. So I needed to get my soul right and back on track with God. That's one of the things. I needed to look at my support structure. Who do I go to for support? Who can I lean on? Who can be there? I am a proponent of counseling. I think that not everyone needs counseling, but everyone benefits from counseling. So if you want to shift or change anything in your life, a counselor and or a coach are the way to go, because you don't know what you don't know. And you need somebody who is looking from the outside, who can see the whole picture. You only see what's in the frame. You need somebody who can see the whole picture to let you know what's going on. I looked at things like, what are my goals and what's my why? Do I want a certain thing, or do I want to become a certain person because of those limiting beliefs? Or do I want that because it really is a part of my purpose? Where does God have me going in life? And is this going to help me get there or hinder me in terms of getting there? So again, it's fine. Sometimes people want, the big house with the white picket fence. That's okay, as long as it's part of the plan God has for you. And as long as you understand, maybe the reason you want the big house is because you plan to have lots of children. That's totally different than you want the big house because your brother and your sister have a big house, or all your friends have a big house. You know what I mean? So we have to not only look at what we want, but what are the motives behind it? Because if you do the right thing for the wrong reasons, it's still the wrong thing. So we need to always be checking our motives. So I had to do some of that. I had to say, okay, now that I believe this is who I'm called to be, and I know the things that my purpose says I am meant to have, now I have to fill in the gap. What are the things that I need to do in a godly fashion, in his timing, not mine? That was probably the hardest one for me, the timing. But what do I need to do to get from where I am to where I need to be? And again, it needs to be a guided journey. You need someone to hold your hand, let you know where the potholes and the pitfalls and the detours and everything along the path. And we should not rely on family and friends to do that part of it for us, because they're on their own walk. They have their own subjective views. They have their own experiences. And no matter how well intentioned they are, their baggage is going to get in the way of you trying to empty your bags. So you need to go to somebody who really has no skin in the game. When you come to a counselor like you or a coach like me, our only goal is to get you to a healthy place where God has predetermined you ought to be. And all that other stuff doesn't matter.
That is helpful. I was taking a mental note when you said sometimes your friend's baggage or your loved one baggage get in the way of your baggage. You just got a whole bunch of baggage.
How are you going to take the next trip when all your dirty laundry is still in the bag you took on the last trip? Unpack your bags. It reminds me of a story. When I was in college, there was a woman who, she was a year, we were freshmen. There was a woman who was a sophomore, and she was always gathering the Black women, freshmen together in her room to talk about dating and relationships and how you get a man. And I would never go. And so my best friend asked me why I never went. And I said, let me ask you something. Have you ever seen her with a man? Have you ever seen her go out on a date? And I'm running down these questions. It's like, well, there you go. If I'm going to be guided, I want to be guided by somebody who knows the way. And I see no evidence in her life that she knows the way. So it's not like I'm above being guided. Just don't think she's the right guide to get us to a date when we have no evidence that she's ever had one. So
That's real. Choose your guide wisely. Yes, I learned that the hard way. So yes, 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 yes. Well, we are having such a great conversation. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to talk about, when we return, some of the great things that God is doing in your life now. So stay tuned.
The trauma healing has actually given us an opportunity to truly share some of the pain that we've gone through that has caused us to be in this place.
I think the use of scripture and truth, along with stories that are relatable, begin to start the dialogue for women to be able to recognize and be able to connect the fact that he is in their circumstances with whatever situation.
With this trauma healing groups, we've been able to see people shed their masks and really just open up and share things that they too didn't even realize. And
the transformation from the participants really included just being able to bring their heart to Jesus.
What's amazing is some of them came with particular hurts or wounds that they wanted to share.
It allowed me to be free with some deep-rooted things that I never spoke, and know that it was all right for me to speak them.
Being able to recognize their emotions from the very start.
There was no judgment. It more or less said that this is okay, that this is what's needed.
Just the power from being in the room with other women, recognizing that it's okay to share our hurts. It's good to be able to recognize what is a safe place and to be able to take all of those hurts to the cross.
They realized it's something different that they were there to share. And they found healing in ways that they didn't expect.
But once I got to that place of understanding how this kind of really does work, I had a moment of complete release. In that release, I was able to truly open up, even if it wasn't to anyone but to me and God, but to truly open up about some of the things that I had been suppressing or trying to suppress for years.
Every little bit about it is a soft brushstroke that all combines to make just a really beautiful picture. For them to be able to see the different too and have some of the tools that the Trauma Healing Institute implements are very helpful.
I'm always surprised how God is using this. It's a good place to be.
Welcome back from our commercial break. It is such a joy to talk with you, Dr. Linda. I still have so many questions. And one of the things that I would love for you to share with our audience is what's happening with you now, especially as it relates to relationships.
All right. So, of course, I had my trials and failures, but I am in, oh my gosh, I hate to have to use the number, but I'm in my third marriage, and this is my final marriage. That's how I refer to it. This is my final marriage. So, the story on this one is kind of interesting. I'm married to someone that I dated a long time ago. And it was a long distance relationship. Lots of things got in the way. We went our separate ways. We each married other people. He was out of state. And then I was in church one Sunday, and one of the ministries, I serve on several, but one of the ministries I serve on is guest services. So I was in a position where I'm greeting as people are coming into the church. And I saw this guy who from the back looked just like, and so I called his name and he turned around. It's like, oh my gosh. So he's about to go into service. He did come over. He said, hello, are you going to be here right after service? I said, yes, I'll be in the same spot to say goodbye as you're leaving. So he said, okay, cool. So when he came back out, big hug, how you doing? We got caught up a little bit. He said, I am going to New York for a week. When I come back, I'll give you a call and we'll connect. So he reached out to me in some form or fashion every day while he was in New York. He got back. We went to lunch and we were together just about every day since then. What he told me after I became his wife was that when he got back before he left to go to New York, at some point in there, yes, it was a week before he was going to New York for the week. And so during that week, I didn't hear from him. But I'm like, he said he was going to call. If he does, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. And what I found out after we got married was the reason he didn't call was because he was praying to God. He said he was laying prostrate, praying to God, because he said in his spirit, when he saw me, the spirit said, behold, the woman you have been praying for. He said, so he wanted to make sure that he was not entering into a relationship that he was not supposed to be entering into. He had been divorced for 2 years back in Atlanta and had not dated anyone. So he said, before I call her, I need to make sure that this is the one. So it's so interesting because anytime I tell that story, he cries. And so that was sort of how we got back together again. And yeah, it's just when I dated him, it was between my first and my second husbands. So I had my 2 sons, he had a daughter, our kids kind of met one another. And it's so interesting. When he proposed, it was on a Christmas day and my boys were home and he proposed in front of them. One son said, it's about time. The other son said, what took you so long? We had great relationships. My bonus daughter calls me just about every single day. I mean, we've got a great blended family, but I attribute all of that to a couple of things, all rooted again in God. The focus on who do I need to be? How do I get back to my authentic self? It wasn't that there were things that I was doing or not doing that were wrong. It's just I was reading off the wrong script. I was deep down inside, I was still hurt from the baggage of my previous 2 husbands. I still had some issues that I didn't realize until not very long ago that were really daddy issues. I had some issues with respect to the way I saw my dad treat my mom, even though logically I could tell you that that was wrong and all of those things, but on a deeper emotional level, somehow it painted a picture of those are things that sometimes go on in marriage. So when they would happen to me, I felt like on that subconscious level, okay, that's what happens. I did some self sabotaging that I had to heal from because, again, your subconscious brain is supposed to protect you. So if it sees something, it will tell your conscious brain to either run or fight. That's that fight or flight syndrome. So you've got to go through the healing of all of those things before you could move on. So this one is working. And again, it's not perfect what marriage is. So if you go in looking for perfection, you will fail every single time. But when there are challenges, the thing to do is say, okay, Lord, what is the lesson that I'm supposed to be learning from this? I'm a firm believer that conflict in a marriage is God's way of asking you to change. And most of the time, what we do is we want to pray that God will deal with him, deal with that problem. No, God is saying, how patient are you? How kind are you? How much are you in self control? How gentle are you? God is looking for the fruit of the Spirit in you. So when there's conflict, he's looking at you to do what you're supposed to do. He's looking at your spouse to do what he's supposed to do. And until you really grab a hold of that, any situation that you get yourself into is not going to work. Because I'll tell you, in my family history, my dad was abusive to my mom. I never saw it because I was the youngest, but I knew all about it. So it's interesting. Just knowing those things when you come into a relationship, if someone speaks to you in a loud voice, you're either going to submit because of what you saw, or you're going to rise up and you're going to be like, I'm out of here because nobody is going to talk to me because I know what this might lead to. Neither of those responses is correct. So again, you've got to get back in touch with God. And when people come through my program, I didn't decide that there would be 7 steps, but when I look at it, if you come to one of my retreats, there's 7 modules we cover. And then I also have a process on how you become your authentic self. And in thinking about it, there's 7 steps to that too. I didn't decide on 7, but we know 7 is the number of completion. So it makes sense that before you start something new, you got to wrap up the existing. So yes, there are modules. Even if you come to my retreats, we have a good time, but you're there to work. And so there are lots of times where we're going through modules that are helping you become different. And I refer to them as an awakening because that's what it is. You're waking up to a brand new you. My logo shows the lotus flower because, again, that flower I've taken to be near and dear to my heart. You know that the lotus grows up through the mud and the muck and the mire. You cannot grow a lotus without mud. And that's kind of the way life is. You're not going to bloom without mud, girl. You're going to get dirty. So you might as well just recognize I'm going to get dirty. I've got to go through some mud and some dirty water, but just keep asking God, what is the purpose? Why do you have me here in the dirty water instead of over there where it's cool and it's clear and clean, And he will give you an answer. There's purpose in that mud. There's purpose in that mud.
Purpose in the mud. Ooh,
Girl,
purpose in the
that
mud.
might be the title of a new something or
I'm
other I got
telling
to
you,
do.
because sometimes we in so much mud, we like, oh my goodness, I can't. But you're right, there's purpose in it. There's purpose in it. And I think TD Jakes talked about, are you being buried or planted? And when we think about that, like sometimes we got this dirt all over us and we like, man, I'm getting buried. No, you are being planted. And in that, you can grow, you can learn. And so how is God planting you? But that's a whole nother message for another day. But back to what you're doing. So I'm very excited about what you're doing through your retreats and your work. And I could tell this is such meaningful work for you. And I actually am going to invite you back for a Monday night live episode where we're going to talk about how you've grown your ministry and have used your story to help others to heal. And so for those of you who are loving this episode, and especially if you're a woman who is called to ministry, I want you to check her out. We're going to have her on our Women of Impact series. And so we'll make sure to have those notes available for us in the show notes. But because we're running out of time, Dr. Linda, any final words of encouragement or advice that you will offer someone who is currently in the mud?
Yes. All right. Remember that there's purpose in the mud. Remember that God can do anything but fail. He knew you were going to be there and he knows how to get you out. So lean into God during this time more than any other. And just make sure that you stay focused on who it is that you're supposed to be. Don't worry about what other people are saying or doing. Focus on you. One of the things that helped get me through, and I believe it gave birth to my book, or the first one, because you know how God talks about, well, God doesn't say this. I've come to believe that when God gives you a message, it's for you first. It's for the messenger before it's for anybody who listens to it. So I was reading in the book of Proverbs, and four tongues became very apparent to me. And I drew this matrix around the four tongues, and that was the basis of the book. And so you speak, when we all speak, there's a certain amount of compassion in our speech, and there's a certain amount of, how much do you talk when you speak? And that will tell you which of those four tongues is primarily yours. So always guard the tongue, because remember, in life, in any relationship, life and death lies within the power of the tongue. So my first book is called Tame Your Tongue and Transform Your Relationship, because so much of what we say impacts people. Words can hurt more than sticks and stones and all the little things mama told you when you were growing up. So that's the first book. The second one is Tame Your Tongue and Transform Your Organization, How to Close the Employee Inclusion Gap. Because as much as this is my passion and the work that I do, it started with me doing diversity work. I am a certified diversity expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I started out wanting to work with marginalized people in general. And then that kind of led me to wanting to work with women. And then it led me to wanting to work with Black women, because our experiences are all so different. So it's still part of the same thread. When I'm doing work with a couple, that's diversity. You take a man and a woman and put them together, that's diversity as well. So I'm still doing the diversity work. It's still rooted in who are you being? Who are you showing up to be in any given situation? But if you can hold on to some of those truths about God has a plan and a purpose for your life, and you need to get in touch with what that is. Be the person he has created you to be, so that you can deliver on what it is he would have you deliver on. And when you're in the mud, do a mud bath, girl. It's good for your skin. Don't worry about it. Nothing lasts forever. And I know it's a lot easier said than done, but I know it can be done because I've done it.
Yes, yes. Love it, Dr. Linda. How can our audience get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So you can reach me. I'll give you two email addresses. One, if you're more interested in some of the corporate stuff that I do, or the diversity stuff, that would be Dr. Linda, and it's just DRLINDA at Turning Point, L as in leadership, G as in group.com. My company is called Turning Point Leadership Group. If you're interested in more of the personal things and the coaching and how do I get back in touch with who I am and have that relationship I desire, then you'll go to Dr. Linda at thedrlinda.com. So my website, I would love it if you want to see about our programs. We also have things like great affirmation cards, t-shirts with affirmations on them, anything that you can do to just keep you in that spirit. So again, the website is thedrlinda.com. And I would love to tell people that we're about to start doing probably twice a month in February, we're going to begin offering the workshop where you can absolutely begin to learn what are the limiting beliefs that are getting in my way. And so you'll find information about that on the website as well.
Well, thank you, Dr. Linda, for being
My
here. I'm so
pleasure.
grateful for you. We'll make sure that we have all the information in our show notes on how people can find you on website and on social media. But I will remember, you can grow in the mud.
Go in the mud.
You can grow in the mud. And so you be blessed. I look forward to having you back on our Impact Woman series, just to share more about your journey. Thank you
Thank you
for
so
being
much. God
here.
bless.
God bless. And I thank you all for tuning into another episode of Faith on the Journey. I hope you caught some of those gems that she was dropping as we begin to heal, we begin to explore who are we to become in this process, and remembering that God is always with us. God got us. God got us even in the mud of life. And so if you enjoyed today's episode, do me a favor. And first of all, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and leave us reviews. Show us some love. Let us know what you liked about this episode. I also would love to hear from you if there's any show topics that you would like for us to discuss. So reach out to us. We'll have some information on how you can recommend show topics in our show notes, and share this episode with a friend. So that's it for this episode of Faith on the Journey. I hope you were encouraged. And as always, you keep the faith, you stay encouraged, and keep your faith on the journey. I will see you soon, family. Be blessed.